Hey, what's going on, man? How you doing today?
I'm good. Tired, but I'm good.
Well, I can imagine with the release coming out today and the lead up to it, it must be. I imagine you haven't slept much.
No, no. It's been like 100-hour work weeks for like the past 4 weeks.
Jesus, 100 hours. Well, the game has turned out to be honestly one of my favorite survival games to date. It released today on Steam for $30, and you guys did have a alpha leading up to it. But before we get into those questions, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and a bit about Frostkeep Studios, the development studio that you work for and who made this game?
Yeah. So just me. This is my first industry job. I was actually an alpha tester before I got hired here at Frostkeep.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. I mainly work on balance, everything from combat to crafting, and if you're doing something in game, I probably had my hands on it at some point.
Where did Frostkeep come from? Is this the first game that they've been working on? What's the backstory?
So Frostkeep is founded by three basically industry veterans. I guarantee you pretty much everybody's played a game that they've worked on. One of the founders was the original guy who prototyped and created the original World of Warcraft battlegrounds like Warsong Gulch, Arathi Basin, AV, stuff like that. So they were working at Blizzard for years, right? Then they went on to work on Project Titan, which eventually became Overwatch. Then they moved over to League of Legends. Some of the other guys worked on things like the original Diablo 2, just everything. Like there's a AAA game out there. They probably were on it at some point.
So let's say you're a player who's only seeing this game for the first time, has not had the opportunity to understand what the game is about. How would you describe Rend to them? What is Rend?
That's like a super hard question to answer because there's so much
Mhm.
to our game, right? Like you've seen it, it's super in depth, right? And it's only going to
Absolutely.
get even more in depth as we start unlocking dungeons and bosses and different kinds of raiding mechanics and everything like that.
What
Um,
really?
oh yeah, there's a whole
Wow.
lot more coming. We wanted to get feedback from the community in early access so we can kind of shape the game moving forward with
Mhm.
as much feedback as possible. Our kind of mantra here at Frostkeep is best idea wins out, in the sense that it doesn't have to come from a developer or a community member or just some dude on the street. If their idea is better than we currently have implemented, we'll change whatever we need to make the game better for everybody in general. And I mean, that kind of speaks with how I got hired, right? Like I wasn't working here and they ended up hiring me because my ideas were the better idea than they currently had in the office, right?
Wow. That's definitely something that is uncommon, I think, in the gaming space. Let's talk about the map for a moment.
Right.
What was the philosophy behind the way the map was created and why a map doesn't even exist for a player to view?
That's a conversation we've had internally a ton of times. People wanting maps, people not wanting maps, people wanting just a compass to help get around the map. And it came down to, we felt if we designed the map well enough with points of interest and landmarks that you would be able to quickly find your way around
Mm.
without the need of a map. And I feel like we are pretty close to nailing that. I feel like
Mhm.
there's some bigger things that we could probably add to make it a little bit easier. But we feel that, one, if somebody really wants a map, they're going to make one. We've already seen them posted. I think there's one in your Discord where people posted a map.
Mhm.
Um, and with our modding toolkit and stuff coming out later this year, I'm pretty sure people will implement a map to custom servers anyway, so you can constantly see where you're at.
Wow. Yeah, I from my perspective, I think it adds a level of immersion that um, is hard to capture. Maps can sometimes reduce the feeling of scale, um, as opposed to what I think you have here, which is a sense of the unknown, not knowing what's behind a rock or behind a mountain. Um,
Yeah, exactly. We feel like our game is already super trying to, I guess, immerse you in the world,
mm,
mainly with how it looks, right? Like we really wanted to nail that whole like almost oil painting-ish feel, where it's not necessarily cartoony, but it's definitely like an animated sense of thing. And we felt that that was really a good immersion to have, like an upscaled version of like a World of Warcraft kind of art style, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, and the graphics are absolutely breathtaking, and the design. Was this how was it? How was the map crafted? Is it randomly generated? Were blotches put there?
No, our map's 100% handmade. Everything from every single tree and rock in the world is all hand painted, put down specifically by our map designer, Travis. In terms of actual map expansion, that is happening. We're working on a cave system right now, which is going to be at the center of the map. You'll go through a portal like the other portals, and it's going to be one giant cave that's like pitch black. You'll have to have people carrying torches. You'll have to have either people with like the mystic torch where it's constantly on, or people just holding torches for you, because it's crazy dark. I think there's like 2 or 3 new creatures that are in the dungeon or the cave system only. New resources, new crafting materials. You'll start getting artifacts when you're down there. After that, we'll start working on a lava cave, and then after that, it's the Eternal Waste, which is like our version of hell, basically.
And when you say artifacts, is that an item type? Is that like a level of item, like after legendary, I assume?
Yeah, so you can craft legendary items, right? So you can make your Mastercraft Roughwood bow or Mastercraft Dross Metal crossbow or whatever it is, right? Artifacts are world drops only, and they're only 1 per server. What I mean by 1 per server is you could find Thor's hammer, right? Only 1 person on that server can have Thor's hammer, but since we're a full loot game, anybody can kill him and take that Thor's hammer, right? So it's kind of like end game high tier weapons that kind of change how things play, right? So we might have some really high end melee weapons that do crazy damage, but you have to get close enough to be able to use it, right?
So as a new player coming into the game, you're brought into a starting area, and you make your way towards, eventually find your way towards the base. What are the goals? Like, how would you, I did previously ask, like, what is this game about? But what is the journey from the beginning of a server coming up, and the journey for that player from the server first coming up to the different stages they're likely to experience?
It's kind of hard. It entirely depends on the type of server they're playing on, right? Your server in particular, it's like 5x, I think. Your early game is very, very quick, so you're not going to feel like that really grueling. I'm trying to survive in the world. I need to find food. I need to find water. I need to do that. I need to deal with these wolves. That's all. That's all entirely supposed to be difficult early on, and then become very easy later on. We wanted food and water to not be an issue in the later game, but more so just like an introduction mechanic. Be like, hey, if you don't do this stuff regularly, you will die. So we wanted to kind of introduce that a little bit. In terms of like progressing through the game, we wanted every tier to feel more and more epic. So as you start unlocking the later tiers, the weapons start becoming more extravagant. The armor starts becoming more extravagant. Things start doing a lot more damage. You're able to one-shot things that, previously took you 20, 30 shots to kill, right? Like Ixen, right? You get into tier 4 bow weapon crafting, and you're one-shotting Ixen that currently take you, 2 people, 3 people to kill with the tier 1, tier 2 stuff. We wanted to really focus on the PvP side. With all survival games, you always have this like grandiose idea of that you're going to have these crazy large-scale wars, but in reality, what happens 98% of the time is that your base is just raided while you're offline sleeping, right? And we wanted to try and avoid that as much as possible. So we kind of introduced factions and the shields around the factions to kind of combat that a little bit. But we also wanted to enforce big conflicts with the outposts and the reckoning and stuff like that. With the Reckoning, we didn't want it to be purely PvP focused, so that's why you have the waves of the Lost spawning. We wanted to give something for the players that weren't super into PvP to be able to be like, there's still something for me to be excited for once or twice a week, which is the Reckoning. I mean, that those waves of spawn, it feels like a tower defense, is crazy. Like if you're not prepared, it will wipe out your entire base. And it feels kind of bad when it happens, but at the same time, it's like, oh man, we screwed up. Now we know what not to do next time, right?
So the reckoning, I believe by default is set to occur every twice a week, and when it occurs, these shields that normally protect you from hostile enemies, be it NPCs or be it the other faction, they go down. The debuffs that are around them now disappear. What is the goal outside of protecting the base? Is it to destroy the other factions? Is it to get more spirits? What are these? What are the players? What are the factions attempting to to do? Like, what is
I
their
mean,
end
it's a
goal?
little bit of all of the above, right?
Mhm.
So when you're raiding a base, the ideal outcome is you walk away with either better gear that you had previously, or you're just
Mhm.
taking the gear from the players that you're fighting against so they don't have it, right?
Mm.
An enemy that doesn't have armor or doesn't have good weapons isn't really an enemy anymore until they're able to get it back. And that's the ultimate goal, is to win the game, right? You win the game by
Mm.
collecting your spirits. So if you were to attack the enemy base during the reckoning, and you were able to kill everybody there, wipe them out, you can use explosives or siege weapons on their divinity seed or their divinity stone in the center of the base, and you can steal and siphon all of the spirits that they've collected over the time and then bring them back. The best way to
Oh.
explain our like actual PvP game is a giant game of capture the flag, and instead of one flag, there's 100,000 flags, right? The
Yeah.
first team to capture all 100,000 flags wins the game.
Ah, I see. I see. That makes a lot of sense. The tree in the center. What is that called? Yerven? Um,
Yggdrasil. Yeah, it's a hard one. It's a
Yggdrasil.
mouthful.
Ah, that's a okay. So Yggdrasil, there's three sides of that tree facing towards each faction's base, which has almost a thermometer. I assume once it reaches the top, that's when that faction has hit the hundred
Right.
thousand.
Yeah,
Um,
that's exactly.
what is to be expected once that 100,000 is hit? Does a server wipe? Is there some kind of special event? Um,
So we're still kind of working on that. Right now, the
mm,
server doesn't actually wipe for 72 hours, and you can change that if you're on a custom server, if you want it to wipe immediately or
mhm,
however you want to do it. The idea is once we get around to being able to implement it, is we're going to have like a crazy event, right? Once a team wins, we'll start dropping random artifacts, crazy gear, summoning crazy monsters for everybody to kill. We want it
mhm.
to be like a more of a celebration. Like if you think of
Ah,
like
mhm,
super old school MMORPG
mhm,
end of beta events where you would go into the capital city and GMs would be spawning crazy monsters and loot for you all to fight and just
mhm,
have a good time as like a celebration. It's like, hey, we finished it. Let's move on to the next thing. That's
mm.
kind of what we're looking for with our end of game event. When the team wins, they get bonus ascension points, which they can use to then alter their character for the next round, or
Ah,
use those on
okay.
the next server that they want to move to if it's an official server.
Oh, I see. Now, are custom servers able to do similar? In other words, have some kind of incentive for players that are playing in between, let's say the rounds or the cycles.
Yeah, it'll honestly just be like a switch, right? You can be like, yeah,
Mhm.
turn on end of game, whatever, right? And then you can
Mm.
have these random events constantly happen. It's something that we're still working on and still kind of fleshing out,
Mhm.
but it'll become probably later this year that we'll put that in.
Are there any possible plans for releasing this game to the console?
Yeah, we are looking at console later on. We want to release the game 100, like actually release out of early access before we even consider that.
Mhm.
Just because we want to make the best survival game that we can possibly make on PC, and before we even think about that, it's not out of
Mm.
the question. It's not out of our what's the phrase? It's not out of the realm of possibilities. It's definitely something we're preparing for eventually. Not
Mm.
anytime soon though.
There are currently four classes in the game. One which you'll likely choose right off the bat, and then a second one you can choose as well, allowing you to kind of make a hybrid build of sorts. Are there plans to add to those classes?
So we plan on expanding that eventually. Right now, we want to make sure our classes are balanced and tuned. There's some clear right and wrong choices with classes right now, like
Mhm.
Ass or Assassin slash Pathfinder is
Yeah.
like the most strong class you can pick right now in terms
Yeah.
of PvP. Um, So we want to make sure our current classes are balanced and every single one you choose is rewarding. But we also want to start implementing the ability to unlock different classes or spells through Ascension as well. So like say you play through a wipe 3 or 4 times, you have a bunch of Ascension points, you can unlock another class that may be a little bit different than the other basic ones.
Oh, I see. We noticed that there's a lot of range weapons and the lack of melee weapons. What was the design decision behind that? And is there a possibility that melee weapons may enter the fray in the future?
So originally in the pre-alpha, there was some melee weapons, but the problem is with melee weapons with friendly fire, it gets really sloppy. When you have multiple people fighting something, right? Like I'm swinging my sword and I'm hitting people next to me that are my friendlies. And if I'm hitting you and I'm losing faction reputation, that kind of feels bad.
Yeah.
And we were more fans of like a shooter game, right? Like we love games like CS:GO and Overwatch. And, you know, I was a big Quake player. I tried playing Quake Champions. Wasn't my thing, but I love the original Quake. You know what I mean?
Quake 2 was and Rocket Arena was what made me get into gaming, quite frankly.
Yeah, like I still every now and then will jump on Quake Champions just to play some Instagib because that's just fun, right? So we wanted to have more of an arcadey feel to our combat, which is why we have more hit scan weapons than anything. But also, we're not opposed to adding more melee weapons. We do have a couple currently in game that are artifacts. I don't know if you'll be able to get them currently in this current patch, but we do have a few. Yeah.
Really? So there are melee weapons in the game. That's wow. Okay, I didn't expect there to be any.
Yeah, so there's we have like a giant axe, we have like a Thor's hammer kind of thing. We have those items. Some of them are just prototypes, some of them are actual items that are fully fleshed out. But we're not dropping them because we want to make sure the current combat system is working perfectly, and then we'll start, you know, adding more layers to it later on.
What sort of like anti-griefing mechanisms have been put in place to kind of prevent that?
That's something that we're always 100% going to be reworking and increasingly better. Same with like anti-cheating, anti-exploiting, anti-hacking, stuff like that. It's something that's like somebody will figure out how to bypass our current system, then we'll patch it and fix it. Then they'll find a new way, and then we'll patch it and we'll fix it. And then, you know, it's just it's an ongoing battle. It's always cat and mouse, right? So we're always going to be striving to make the right decisions to prevent it or to fix people from doing it. The problem is you have to have some kind of trust in your team to not do something, right? And unfortunately, it's the internet, right? Like we've all played games like League of Legends and Overwatch where you're thrown onto a team with a Teemo or Symmetra only player and you lose. Like, yeah, that sucks. But at the same time, it was their choice to do that. Same thing with like EVE Online. I think EVE Online's a really good one to compare it to, where EVE Online, you have, you know, people playing for thousands of hours, years, right? And then you have one guy that's been potentially a spy for another enemy clan or faction that decided he was going to dismantle that entire faction from the inside out. He planned and put tons of time into doing something like that. And in reality, that's really cool that he was able to do that. Even though it sucked for the people involved, it was a story. And it was really neat, and it was something that people will talk about forever in that game because that's happened a couple times, and they're crazy, crazy epic stories that people still talk about. So we want to give players not necessarily the ability to ruin teams, but the ability to make a decision, whether it's right or wrong, but they will be punished no matter what, right? So like what it comes down to is we have things in place that we're calling it's not a player facing thing, but it's more of a back end thing where we're calling it a jerk score, right? If a player's too much of a jerk, they will eventually get banned from our server. And if they get banned from too many servers, they will be banned from all official servers. And then when it comes down to unofficial servers, you have admins. They can ban players that are jerks, right? They can revert things that happen. Will also be something that we wanted to get in for EA, we weren't able to get it, was our form of sleepers, right? So if you log out outside the base, your corpse is still there. if you log out inside the base, an elder would still be able to have access to your stuff, but other players wouldn't, right?
Oh, that would be cool.
So like if somebody were to log in, take everything out of the faction base and log out, the elder would still be able to do something and get all that back for them, right? Same thing with like deleting characters. We just put this in one of our patches, where if somebody creates a character, logs into a base, takes everything out of the base, deletes their character, previously everything that was on that character is gone. When that character is now deleted, everything that was on that character is now dropped in the world by the divinity stone. So it's all recoverable.
What happens if one day the elders disappear and they are very far on XP from one another? That seems very circumstantial.
It is, but
unlikely.
we also have stuff in place for it. So if you don't log on for a certain amount of time, your rep doesn't change, but your elder will get passed on to the next person in line. That's active, right?
Okay.
So if you stop playing, your elder will eventually get passed on to somebody else.
Oh, so even if those, let's say there was those like the elder was way beyond anyone else's reputation, and he goes off on a 1-year journey to, I don't know, somewhere. The game the faction won't just fall over.
Right. Yeah.
Well, thank you again, Matt. I really do appreciate it.
Dude, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me on. It's fun.
Absolutely.
All right. Thanks, man. Have a good one.
Thank you.